Silence is often mistaken for weakness. That is exactly why so many people never see the real turning point coming. A super empath rarely raises their voice. They rarely seek revenge. They rarely fight to prove a point. Instead, they watch. They listen. They give people chance after chance, even when their own heart is quietly breaking. To the outside world, it can look like endless patience. It can look like unconditional love. It can even look like someone who will always forgive. But there is one emotional mistake that changes everything. One invisible line that, once crossed, cannot simply be erased with an apology. Most people never notice when that moment arrives, because a super empath does not announce it. There is no dramatic goodbye, no loud argument, no desperate attempt to make the other person understand. The change happens quietly, deep inside. By the time everyone else notices, the relationship has already reached a place where it can never return to what it once was. Many people believe that super empaths forgive everything because they understand everyone's pain. They think empathy means accepting endless disappointment. They assume that kindness has no limits. That belief could not be further from the truth. The deeper an empath understands human emotions, the more clearly they recognize the difference between someone who makes an honest mistake and someone who repeatedly chooses to cause pain. This difference is what changes their entire view of a person. It is not anger that pushes a super empath away. It is clarity. Once clarity arrives, everything else begins to fall into place. The person who once defended you starts seeing patterns they ignored for months or even years. The excuses disappear. The confusion fades. What remains is a truth that cannot be hidden anymore. This is where many relationships quietly fall apart, not because love disappeared overnight, but because trust slowly reached its limit. Trust is often treated like a simple promise, but for a super empath, it is much more than that. It is the feeling of emotional safety. It is knowing their kindness will not be used against them. It is believing their honesty will not become another weapon in someone else's hands. Once that safety is broken too many times, the heart begins protecting itself in ways that surprise everyone around them. The same person who once answered every message immediately becomes silent. The same person who once carried everyone's emotional weights suddenly steps back. To those who never understood them, this change feels cold. To the super empath, it feels necessary. There is another truth that very few people talk about. Super empaths are often excellent at reading emotions, but they are also incredibly hopeful. Hope keeps them believing people can change. Hope encourages them to stay longer than most people would. Hope tells them that today's apology might finally become tomorrow's action. This beautiful quality also creates their greatest struggle. Their ability to see potential sometimes hides reality. They keep focusing on the good moments while quietly carrying the pain caused by the bad ones. Over time, this emotional imbalance grows heavier. Every broken promise leaves another mark. Every act of disrespect becomes harder to ignore. Every moment of emotional manipulation slowly teaches them a lesson they never wanted to learn. Psychologists often describe empathy as the ability to understand another person's emotional experience without losing awareness of your own. But many highly empathetic people spend years doing exactly the opposite. They become so focused on understanding others that they stop listening to themselves. Their own feelings are pushed aside. Their own needs become less important. They tell themselves to be patient. They tell themselves to be compassionate. They tell themselves that everyone deserves another chance. These beliefs come from kindness, but without healthy boundaries, kindness can slowly become self-neglect. The moment a super empath realizes this is often the beginning of their biggest transformation. They stop asking why someone keeps hurting them. They start asking why they kept allowing it. That single question changes everything. It shifts their attention away from fixing other people and toward protecting their own peace. It does not happen because they suddenly become selfish. It happens because they finally understand that love without respect cannot survive. Compassion without boundaries becomes exhaustion. Loyalty without honesty becomes emotional imprisonment. This realization is one of the least understood parts of being a super empath. People celebrate their kindness, but rarely talk about the emotional cost that kindness can carry when it is given to someone who never truly values it. Today's video explores the one emotional mistake that crosses the final line for a super empath. It is not the mistake most people expect. It is not simply betrayal. It is not only lying. It is not even ordinary conflict. The truth is much deeper, and once you understand it, you will begin seeing relationships in a completely different way. You will discover why some people receive endless patience while others lose a super empath forever after a single moment. You will learn what quietly happens inside the mind of someone whose compassion has finally reached its limit. You will also understand why their silence is often misunderstood and why the people who hurt them usually realize the truth far too late. As we move through this journey together, you will uncover psychological insights that explain why highly empathetic people react differently from everyone else when trust is broken. You will learn about emotional boundaries that most people never notice until they have already crossed them. You will see how repeated disrespect slowly changes even the kindest heart. You will also discover why the strongest super empaths are not those who forgive endlessly, but those who finally learn when forgiveness no longer requires another chance. This perspective has been supported by years of psychological research into empathy, emotional intelligence, trust, and healthy relationships. Yet it is rarely discussed in everyday conversations. That is why so many people misunderstand the quiet decisions made by deeply empathetic individuals. Stay with me until the very end, because the final lesson may completely change the way you see forgiveness, loyalty, and emotional strength. It explains why the greatest act of love is not always holding on. Sometimes it is knowing when to let go without anger, without revenge, and without looking back. That final insight has helped countless people understand why some relationships end silence instead of conflict,
and why that silence often speaks louder than words ever could.
Welcome to our channel, where we explore the hidden psychology of empathy, emotional intelligence, relationships, and personal growth in a way that is simple, practical, and deeply meaningful. If you enjoy thoughtful content that helps you better understand yourself and the people around you, make sure to subscribe and join our growing community. Now, let's uncover the one emotional mistake that a super empath never truly forgives, and why crossing that invisible line changes everything forever. Most people think empathy is simply being kind. They believe an empath is someone who cries easily, forgives quickly, and always puts others first. That description only touches the surface. A super empath operates from a much deeper place. Their greatest ability is not feeling emotions more strongly than everyone else. It is recognizing emotions that other people try to hide. They notice small changes in tone. They sense when a smile is forced. They can feel tension in a room before anyone speaks. While others pay attention to words, a super empath pays attention to everything surrounding those words. The pauses, the hesitation, the sudden change in energy, the look that lasts a second too long. None of these details seem important alone, but together they create a picture that few people can see. This is why many people feel deeply understood when they are around a super empath. They feel seen without having to explain themselves. They feel accepted even when they are struggling to accept themselves. That ability makes a super empath a source of comfort, but it also places an enormous emotional weight on their shoulders. Every conversation becomes more than a conversation. Every relationship becomes more than a relationship. They are constantly processing emotions that do not even belong to them. Over time, this creates both wisdom and exhaustion. One of the biggest misunderstandings about super empaths is the belief that they trust too easily. In reality, they often notice warning signs much earlier than anyone else. Their intuition speaks long before their mind can explain why something feels wrong. The problem is not that they fail to recognize the truth. The problem is that they hope the truth will change. They believe people deserve understanding. They know everyone has wounds. They know fear can make people act in unhealthy ways. Because they understand human pain so deeply, they naturally look beyond someone's behavior and search for the reason behind it. That quality is beautiful, but it can also become dangerous. Every time someone disappoints them, they ask themselves whether that person is hurting, rather than asking whether that person is hurting them. They become experts at explaining away behavior that should never have been accepted in the first place. A broken promise becomes a stressful week. A lie becomes fear of rejection. Emotional distance becomes childhood trauma. Harsh words become temporary frustration. Slowly, excuses begin replacing reality. Not because they are blind, but because their compassion keeps giving people another opportunity to become better. Psychology teaches that empathy allows people to understand another person's internal experience, but healthy empathy also requires boundaries. Without boundaries, empathy stops being a gift and starts becoming self-sacrifice. Many super empaths spend years learning this lesson the hard way. They believe love means standing beside someone through every difficulty. They believe loyalty means staying when life becomes complicated. Those beliefs are not wrong. The problem begins when only one person carries the emotional responsibility for the relationship. A healthy relationship allows both people to grow together. An unhealthy one slowly turns one person into the healer while the other becomes comfortable remaining wounded. The super empath starts solving problems that are not theirs. They calm arguments they did not start. They apologize just to restore peace. They carry guilt for situations they never created. Little by little, their own emotional needs disappear behind the needs of everyone else. They wake up each day thinking about how to make someone else feel better while quietly ignoring the growing emptiness inside themselves. This is why so many people misunderstand the calm nature of a super empath. Calm does not always mean peace. Sometimes it means constant emotional work happening beneath the surface. Their mind is always observing. Their heart is always trying to understand. Their instincts are always searching for balance. While other people react immediately, a super empath often waits. They reflect. They give time. They believe emotions settle when people feel heard, that patience can make them appear almost impossible to hurt. Friends admire how forgiving they are. Family members rely on them to fix conflict. Partners assume they will always stay because they always have before. Very few people stop to ask how much emotional pressure that patience requires. Very few realize that every disappointment is remembered, even if it is forgiven. Every broken promise leaves a quiet mark. Every moment of disrespect settles somewhere deep inside. The empath may smile. They may continue supporting the relationship. They may choose understanding instead of confrontation. But the emotional memory remains. Unlike ordinary memory, emotional memory does not simply store facts. It stores feelings. It remembers how safe someone made you feel. It remembers whether your vulnerability was respected or used against you. It remembers who protected your heart and who slowly taught your heart to become careful. Super empaths carry these emotional memories with incredible accuracy. Months after everyone else has forgotten a conversation, they still remember exactly how it made them feel. This is not because they enjoy holding on to pain. It is because emotions create powerful memories inside the brain. Researchers studying emotional intelligence have found that emotionally meaningful experiences leave stronger impressions than ordinary events. Super empaths naturally process these emotional experiences more deeply, which means every act of kindness and every act of betrayal carries lasting significance. Because they notice emotional patterns, super empaths rarely judge someone based on a single mistake. Everyone has bad days. Everyone says the wrong thing sometimes. Everyone acts out of fear or stress. A super empath understands this better than most people. They are usually the first person to offer another chance, then another, then another. To outsiders, it almost seems endless. People begin believing there is no limit to their forgiveness. But there is a limit. The surprising part is that it usually has very little to do with one dramatic event. It grows quietly through repetition. Every time someone says, "I'll change," without changing. Every time respect is replaced with convenience. Every time honesty disappears when it becomes uncomfortable. Each moment seems small by itself, but together they begin forming a pattern that cannot be ignored forever. Patterns matter more to a super empath than isolated incidents. One argument does not end a relationship. One disagreement does not erase love. One misunderstanding does not destroy trust. What changes everything is discovering that the same emotional wound keeps appearing despite every conversation, every apology, and every promise. This is where the one emotional mistake slowly begins revealing itself. It is not simply lying. It is not simply betrayal. It is not something much deeper than either of those. The mistake is making a super empath believe that their emotional safety matters to you while repeatedly proving through your actions that it does not. That contradiction cuts deeper than ordinary conflict because it attacks the very foundation of trust. Words continue saying one thing while behavior quietly says another. The empath begins living inside two different realities, one created by promises, the other created by repeated experiences. Eventually, those realities collide. This emotional contradiction is one of the most painful experiences for someone who values authenticity. Super empaths invest their hearts honestly. They mean what they say. When they apologize, they try to improve. When they promise loyalty, they intend to keep it. Because they approach relationships this way, they naturally expect consistency from others. They do not expect perfection. They simply expect sincerity. Once sincerity disappears, confusion enters the relationship. The empath starts questioning themselves. Maybe they misunderstood. Maybe they expected too much. Maybe they are being overly sensitive. These thoughts repeat over and over because compassionate people often examine themselves before blaming others. Unfortunately, someone who repeatedly ignores their emotional needs may unknowingly encourage this self-doubt. The empath becomes trapped between what they feel and what they hope is true. There comes a moment when hope begins losing its strength, not because love disappears, but because evidence becomes impossible to ignore. Every promise that remained empty, every conversation that changed nothing, every apology followed by the same behavior. The super empath suddenly stops searching for better explanations. They stop asking why the other person acts this way. Instead, they ask a much more important question. What is this relationship teaching me about how I allow myself to be treated? That question changes everything because it moves responsibility back where it belongs. Instead of trying to control another person's choices, they begin examining their own boundaries. Instead of asking how to save the relationship, they ask how to save their peace. This shift often happens silently. There is rarely an announcement. No dramatic speech, no emotional performance. The outside world sees the same gentle person. They still speak politely. They still show respect. They still avoid unnecessary conflict. But inside, something irreversible has begun. Their heart is no longer trying to convince itself that tomorrow will finally be different. Their intuition, which had been whispering for so long, is finally being heard. What once felt like uncertainty now feels like clarity. The emotional fog begins lifting, and with every passing day, they see the relationship exactly as it is instead of how they wished it could become. That clarity is the point many people mistake for coldness. They wonder why the super empath suddenly seems distant. They ask why the conversations feel different. They notice the endless patience has quietly disappeared. What they fail to realize is that the change did not happen overnight. It was built over hundreds of small moments that seemed unimportant at the time. Every ignored feeling, every broken promise, every repeated disappointment added another small stone to an invisible wall. Eventually, the wall became too strong to ignore. The greatest transformation of a super empath happens when they finally understand one powerful truth. Their heart was never the problem. Their kindness was never a weakness. Their ability to forgive was never something they needed to lose. The lesson was never about becoming colder. It was about becoming wiser. For a long time, a super empath may believe that love means staying no matter how much it hurts. They may believe understanding someone means accepting everything they do. But true emotional strength comes from realizing that compassion must include yourself too. The same patience, loyalty, and care you give to others must also be given to your own heart. A super empath does not walk away because they stopped caring. They walk away because they finally started caring about themselves. They understand that protecting their peace is not an act of anger, it is an act of self-respect. They realize that forgiveness does not always mean allowing someone back into the same place where they caused pain. Sometimes forgiveness means releasing the resentment while still choosing a healthier path. The world often celebrates people who give endlessly, but the strongest people are not those who allow themselves to be drained forever. The strongest people are those who know when their energy, their trust, and their love are being treated as a gift or being treated as something that can be taken for granted. A super empath's greatest power is not the ability to keep forgiving someone who refuses to change. Their greatest power is the wisdom to recognize when a relationship is costing them their own identity. It is the courage to choose peace over chaos. It is the strength to walk away without hatred and move forward without needing anyone to understand their decision. Because sometimes the final act of love is not holding on tighter. Sometimes the final act of love is letting go with a calm heart. If this message connected with you, remember that protecting your peace is not selfish. Your emotions matter, your boundaries matter, your heart matters. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to like it, share it with someone who needs to hear this message, and subscribe to our channel for more powerful insights about empathy, emotional intelligence, relationships, and personal growth. Thank you for watching, and remember, the most powerful empath is not the one who gives endlessly. It is the one who finally learns that their own heart deserves the same love they have always given to others.